The galactic conclave simmered in uneasy silence, broken only by the faint hum of bioluminescent translators flickering like restless fireflies. The air carried the weight of something ominous, an unspoken threat that tightened around every delegate like an invisible snare. Delegates from dozens of species sat in their ornate chambers, their bioluminescent translators flickering in muted hues. Accustomed to debates on trade agreements, territorial disputes, and rare biological phenomena, the delegates had never faced a topic quite like this. But today the topic was humanity. "We cannot let them continue unchecked," growled Councillor Torvex of the Clythax Dominion, his massive form bristling with spines. "They're a primitive species with no regard for the rules of galactic engagement. Their very existence is a threat to the stability of this council." "Primitive?" retorted Ambassador Lyra of the Vaer Confederation, her translucent form shimmering with indignation. "They may not have the technological sophistication of the Eldari or the biological prowess of the Zircon, but their ingenuity and resilience are unparalleled. Need I remind you of the Battle of Epsilon Prime?" Torvex's spine stiffened. "Exactly my point. They turned a defeat into a victory by—" He hesitated, the memory visibly troubling him. "By deploying tactics that shattered reason and morality itself. They weaponized their own planet. What kind of species does that?" A murmur rippled through the chamber, the weight of Epsilon Prime lingering like a ghost among them. Humanity's history was littered with such examples. Battles won not by superior firepower, but by sheer audacity and an unnerving willingness to sacrifice everything. At the center of the chamber, a holographic image of Earth rotated slowly. Its blue and green hues seemed serene, a stark contrast to the chaos its inhabitants had unleashed upon the galaxy. Ambassador Lyra stepped forward, her form refracting the light. "You misunderstand them, Counselor. Humanity's greatest weapon isn't their technology or their numbers. It's something far more terrifying." The room fell silent. Delegates leaned forward, their curiosity piqued. Lyra's voice softened, almost as if she feared the words she was about to speak. "It's their unpredictability. Their capacity to adapt, to endure, to turn even the direst of situations into opportunities. You can't predict their next move because even they don't know it." Before anyone could respond, the chamber's lights dimmed abruptly, and a sharp, ominous tone sliced through the heavy air. A holographic display appeared, showing the face of a young human officer, her features resolute and unyielding. "This is Commander Elena Torres of the Earth Defense Fleet. To all galactic powers monitoring this transmission, we've intercepted a Zircon fleet en route to Earth. Your neutrality will be respected if you choose to stay out of this conflict. However, if any of you provide aid to the Zircon, you will be considered an enemy of humanity." Gasps erupted across the chamber. The Zircon were one of the most feared species in the galaxy, their bioengineered warriors capable of dismantling entire fleets. Stories of their destruction were whispered like dark legends. Colonies razed to ash, fleets annihilated in mere hours, and no survivors left to recount the horrors firsthand. And yet, here was a human, a species barely a century into interstellar travel, issuing a warning to the entire conclave. Torvex sneered. "Arrogant?" Lyra's gaze didn't waver from the hologram. "Determined?" Commander Torres ended the transmission and leaned back in her seat. The dim glow of Earth's defense grid filled the room, its orbital platforms readying for the inevitable assault. Her crew worked tirelessly around her, their faces a mixture of fear and resolve. "Ma'am, we've detected the Zircon fleet entering the outer system," said Lieutenant Harris, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Torres nodded, her jaw tightening. "Send a message to the fleet. Code Red. All civilian vessels are to retreat to safe zones. Engage Defense Protocols Alpha 9. Around her, the hum of the bridge seemed to grow louder, the weight of the command pressing down on every officer as they prepared for the storm ahead. Harris hesitated. "Do you really think we can hold them off?" Torres turned to him, her eyes piercing. "Lieutenant, humanity doesn't fight because we know we'll win. We fight because surrender is a concept we refuse to entertain." The words settled over the bridge like a battle cry. Around them, the vast expanse of space seemed to shrink as the first blips of the Zircon fleet appeared on their displays. Massive bioorganic ships, pulsating with eerie luminescence, moved with terrifying purpose. Torres took a deep breath. "Initiate the contingency plan?" Harris blinked. The contingency plan? "But, Commander, that's not up for debate, Lieutenant," Torres interrupted. "We're not just defending Earth today. We're sending a message." In the heart of the Zircon flagship, Overlord KRNT watched the human fleet with a mixture of amusement and disdain. Pathetic, he hissed, his mandibles clicking. Their ships are outnumbered and outmatched. This will be a swift victory. But as the Zircon fleet advanced, their scanners began to pick up anomalies. Human ships were breaking formation, moving unpredictably. Carwan T, second in command, approached nervously. Overlord, their movements, they're erratic. Uncoordinated? Carwan T sneered. Uncoordinated? Or desperate? Then it happened. The outermost human ships surged forward with unyielding resolve, their collisions igniting blinding explosions that tore through the Zircon fleet. The Zircon ships faltered, their organic hulls unable to withstand the shockwaves. Suicide tactics? Carwan T roared, his mandibles clicking erratically as his eyes darted over the tactical display. Fools. They're destroying their own fleet. What madness drives them to such extremes? He leaned forward, his tone growing sharper, the edges of fear creeping into his voice as the realization dawned. This was no act of desperation but a strategy born of cold, calculated defiance. But as more human ships followed suit, it became clear, this wasn't desperation. It was a calculated sacrifice. Each explosion forced the Zircon ships into tighter formations, corralling them toward Earth's orbit. Commander Torres watched the battle unfold, her jaw clenched. Activate the grid, Torres ordered, her voice carrying the weight of calculated resolve. Across Earth's orbit, the defense platforms came to life, their energy signatures spiking with an ominous hum that reverberated through the vacuum of space. Beams of focused plasma erupted from the grid, their blinding brilliance illuminating the void as they sliced through the clustered Zircon ships with surgical precision. The airless silence of space was broken only by the visual cacophony of fiery explosions, debris scattering like embers from a dying star. In minutes, the invincible fleet was reduced to smoldering debris. On the Resolute, the crew erupted into cheers, their voices echoing in celebration. But Torres remained unmoving, her gaze fixed on the tactical display, her thoughts already on the battles yet to come. She knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy would see today not just as a victory for Earth, but as a testament to humanity's most terrifying power, the willingness to adapt, to endure, and to do whatever it took to survive. And with that, the rules of galactic conflict were forever altered, as the unpredictability of humanity became the greatest variable every species would now fear. And as the galactic conclave watched in stunned silence, they realized that the battle for Earth had just rewritten the rules of war. The wreckage of the Zircon fleet drifted silently through the void, shards of twisted metal and charred organic debris glinting faintly against the starlight. Each fragment whispered of humanity's uncanny ability to defy overwhelming odds and rewrite the rules of survival. But while Earth celebrated its survival, the galaxy had already begun to shift. In the halls of the galactic conclave, an uneasy stillness gripped the chamber. The holographic replay of the battle faded from the display, leaving the delegates suspended in a collective silence of disbelief and apprehension. Even Counselor Torvex, who had been so vocal about humanity's perceived recklessness, remained uncharacteristically quiet. The chamber's air was thick with an unspoken question. What would humanity do next? Ambassador Lyra broke the silence, her calm voice carrying a razor-sharp edge, as though she alone understood the urgency of the moment. You've all seen what they're capable of. Their unpredictability is their strength, and it's not confined to their battle strategies. Humanity's ingenuity extends beyond war, to diplomacy, science, and survival itself. If we do not adapt, we risk being left behind. Torvex's spines bristled at her words, his massive frame leaning forward with indignation. Adapt? You suggest we embrace the chaos they embody? Lyra's translucent form shimmered as she turned to face him directly. Not recklessness. Resilience. Humanity doesn't succeed because they abandon reason. They succeed because they redefine it. They've turned desperation into an art form, and that makes them the most dangerous force the galaxy has ever encountered. Before Torvex could respond, the chamber's central display activated once more, showing a live feed from Earth. Commander Torres stood at a podium, her image broadcast across the galaxy. Her voice carried the same unyielding determination that had marked her earlier transmission. To all galactic powers watching this, let me be clear, she began. Humanity's victory today was not a declaration of dominance but a statement of survival. We have no desire to conquer, but we will not allow ourselves to be conquered. Let this serve as a reminder. We value peace, but we will never hesitate to defend our home. Her words rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. Some delegates nodded in quiet agreement, while others exchanged uneasy glances. Torvex, however, leaned forward, his voice a low growl. She speaks of peace, but their actions betray a species willing to do whatever it takes to achieve dominance. Lyra sighed, her patience clearly waning. Perhaps you'd prefer to focus on their words instead of your own fears, counselor. Humanity's strength is not in their capacity for destruction but in their refusal to accept defeat. On Earth, the aftermath of the battle was anything but serene. The defense platforms hummed with residual energy, their systems cycling down from the intensity of the engagement. In the command center of the Resolute, Commander Torres surveyed the scene with a mixture of relief and grim determination. "Ma'am, all remaining Zircon ships have retreated beyond the system's edge," Lieutenant Harris reported. "No signs of reinforcements?" Torres nodded. "Good. But this isn't over," Torres said, her voice laced with the kind of tension that lingered after the storm. "Begin a full analysis of the battle. I want every detail catalogued, every maneuver, every mistake, every strength. Be ready to learn and prepare." Harris hesitated. "Commander, with respect, we just won a major victory. Shouldn't we take a moment to celebrate?" Torres finished, her tone sharper than she intended. She softened slightly at the sight of his startled expression. "Lieutenant, this victory was a warning shot. The Zircon will regroup and next time they won't underestimate us. If we're not ready for that, today's victory will mean nothing." Harris nodded, chastened but understanding. "Understood, ma'am." Torres turned back to the display, her mind already strategizing for what lay ahead. The galaxy had glimpsed humanity's strength, but she understood that one battle would not be enough to cement their survival, or their place among the stars. The Conclave would debate their future, the Zircon would plan their retaliation, and Earth would need to prepare for the storm that was coming. Deep within Zircon space, Overlord Carwenti paced within the pulsing bioorganic walls of his flagship. The atmosphere buzzed with pheromonal signals, each carrying an undercurrent of unease and anticipation, amplifying the tension in the chamber. His subordinates watched him warily, their antennae twitching in anticipation of his response. "They humiliated us," Carwenti hissed, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "A fledgling species with no empire, no allies, and yet they destroyed one of our finest fleets." "How?" One of his advisors stepped forward cautiously. "Their tactics were unconventional, Overlord. They used their own ships as weapons, forced us into vulnerable positions, and capitalized on their orbital defenses." Carwenti's eyes narrowed. "Cowards' tricks. They lack the honor of direct combat." "Perhaps, my lord," the advisor replied, "but their methods were effective. If we are to face them again, we must adapt. The humans fight like nothing we have encountered before." Carwenti snarled, the sound reverberating through the chamber. "Then we will study them. Learn their weaknesses. And when the time comes, we will crush their resolve as thoroughly as they crushed our fleet." The pheromonal signals in the room shifted, carrying a mix of determination and fear. The Zircon were not accustomed to defeat, but neither were they inclined to accept it. Plans were already forming, strategies to counter humanity's unpredictability. But Carwenti could not shake the memory of the human commander's defiant gaze, broadcast across the galaxy. It was a look he would not forget. Back in the Conclave, the chamber buzzed with heated debate, the weight of the recent battle hanging over every exchange. Lyra stood resolute, her voice steady yet sharp, slicing through the cacophony of accusations and fears with measured precision. "If we continue to view humanity as a threat instead of an opportunity, we will doom ourselves to conflict," she argued. "Their capacity for cooperation is as remarkable as their capacity for war. We have a chance to guide them, to learn from them, and perhaps to become stronger together." Torvek scoffed. "Or we could neutralize the threat before it grows beyond our control." "And what would that accomplish?" Lyra countered. "Another war? More destruction. Humanity is not the enemy we should fear. Our own inability to adapt is." As the debates continued, the Conclave's future, and humanity's place within it, hung in the balance. But one thing was clear, the galaxy had changed and there was no going back. The first signs of the Zircon's return were haunting. Their massive, bioorganic ships emerged from the darkness like predators stalking unseen prey, their pulsing hulls glowing faintly against the void. Alarms sounded across Earth's defenses, their blaring tones slicing through the silence. Barely 2 months had passed since their defeat at Earth's orbital defense grid, and already, the galaxy was bracing itself for the storm of their return. From the shadowy corners of the Conclave to the war rooms of Earth's defense fleet, the question was the same: what would humanity do now? Commander Elena Torres stood in the Resolute's command center, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of the console as she watched the tactical display. The Zircon fleet had returned, larger, angrier, and equipped with new weapons that pulsed with ominous energy signatures. But it wasn't their size or firepower that concerned her. It was their strategy. "They're using decoys," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice tense as he pointed to the erratic patterns on the screen. "Their movements don't make sense." Torres nodded grimly, her gaze fixed on the screen. "That's because they've learned. They're trying to bait us into overextending, to exploit the very strategies we used to beat them." A flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Each decision she made carried the weight of countless lives. She couldn't afford a mistake, not when the stakes were this high. "They know how we fought last time, and they're counting on us repeating the same strategies." She turned to her crew, her voice firm. "But we won't give them what they expect. Deploy the countermeasure drones. I want a full electronic warfare suite active on all forward ships. Blind them, confuse them, and make them doubt every move they make." The crew moved with precision, their fear of the approaching Zircon fleet tempered by the trust they placed in their commander. The tactical display flickered as the first wave of countermeasures launched, tiny drones spreading out like seeds in the wind. Within moments, the Zircon fleet's tight formations began to shift, their ships hesitating as false signals and phantom targets overwhelmed their sensors. Far from the battlefield, in the luminous chambers of the galactic conclave, debates over humanity's role in the galaxy reached a crescendo. The air was charged with urgency and tension, punctuated by murmurs and heated whispers. Delegates gestured emphatically, their forms flickering under the holographic light as expressions of unease and determination played across alien faces. Counselor Torvex was once again at the center of the storm, his spines quivering with anger as he addressed the assembly. "This is exactly what I warned you about," he thundered. "Humanity doesn't fight like the rest of us. They don't play by the rules. They've turned war into a theater of chaos, and they've dragged us all into their madness." Ambassador Lyra rose to respond, her translucent form shimmering under the chamber's lights. "And yet, here we are, alive and free because of their willingness to stand against the Zircon. Would you rather we remain at the mercy of a species that sees us as little more than prey?" Torvex bristled. "And when humanity turns its sights on us? When their chaos becomes our destruction? Will you defend them then, Ambassador?" Lyra's voice hardened. "Humanity's strength isn't in chaos, it's in adaptation. They evolve, Counselor. They learn. And perhaps, if we are wise enough, we might learn from them as well." The Zircon flagship loomed at the heart of their fleet, its bioorganic hull pulsating like a living heart. Inside, Overlord Karani loomed over the display, his mandibles twitching as anticipation warred with frustration while the battle played out before him. The humans were responding to his decoys, but not in the way he had hoped. Instead of spreading their forces thin, they had created a wall of interference, blinding his ships and forcing them to retreat into tighter formations. "They are hurting us," Karwenti growled, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "Just as we hoped to hurt them. They've turned our own strategy against us." One of his advisors stepped forward, their voice laced with uncertainty. "Overlord, perhaps we should reconsider our approach. The humans are unpredictable, but they are not invincible." Karwenti's gaze snapped toward the advisor, his eyes narrowing. "Do you think I do not know that? Their unpredictability is their greatest weapon, but it is also their greatest weakness. If we cannot predict them, we must force them to act without thinking. We will create scenarios so chaotic and time-sensitive that they will have no choice but to rely on instinct, and in doing so they will reveal their blind spots. That is where we will strike." He turned back to the display, his mandibles twitching. "Prepare the weapon. Let us see how they respond when they are given no time to adapt." On board the Resolute, alarms blared as the Zircon's flagship unleashed its new weapon. A beam of energy, crackling with an unnatural, almost malevolent light, lanced through space. The first human ship caught in its path disintegrated instantly, its debris scattering into the void. "Commander, they've deployed a new type of weapon," Harris shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "Our shields can't repel it?" Torres's eyes narrowed as she assessed the situation. "Order all ships to disperse," Torres commanded sharply, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Keep moving and don't let them get a lock on you. Every second matters. Harris, I need options and I need them now." The young lieutenant worked furiously at his console, his hands trembling. "We could try overloading their weapons targeting systems with concentrated bursts of energy, but it would require one of our ships to get dangerously close to their flagship." Torres's jaw tightened. "Do it. Find a ship that can execute the maneuver." Harris hesitated. "Ma'am, that's a suicide mission." Torres turned to him, her expression unwavering. Every second we hesitate costs lives. Find me a volunteer, Lieutenant? A voice crackled over the comms. This is Captain Ramirez of the Vanguard. We'll do it, Commander. Just tell us where to aim. Torres's chest tightened at the sound of Ramirez's voice, resolute yet laced with an understanding of the sacrifice ahead. She took a moment to steady herself, knowing the weight of the decision and the lives it would cost. Your bravery will be remembered, she thought, but the words remained unspoken, caught in the gravity of the moment. Torres felt a pang of guilt but pushed it aside. Understood, Captain. Your sacrifice won't be forgotten. All ships provide cover for the Vanguard. Let's give them a clear path. The Vanguard surged forward, its engines burning bright as it weaved through the chaos of battle. The Zircon fleet focused its firepower on the lone ship, but the human fleet retaliated with relentless precision, drawing their attention away. As the Vanguard approached the Zircon flagship, Captain Ramirez's voice came through one last time. For Earth. For humanity. The ship detonated in a blinding explosion, its overloaded reactors releasing a shockwave that rippled through the Zircon fleet. The flagship's weapon systems flickered and died, leaving the remaining ships vulnerable. Commander, their flagship is disabled. Harris exclaimed. Our forces are pushing them back. Torres allowed herself a small, grim smile. Good. Let's finish this. As the battle subsided, the Zircon fleet fell back into the void, their shattered confidence trailing behind them like the wreckage of their defeated ships. The void was littered with debris fields, jagged fragments of bioorganic hulls spinning aimlessly. A heavy silence hung in the aftermath, broken only by the faint flicker of dying ship lights and the distant hum of human vessels regrouping in the shadows. On Earth, the victory was celebrated, but the cost was deeply felt. Memorials were planned for the fallen, their names etched into the annals of human history as reminders of the sacrifices made to ensure survival. In the conclave, the debates took on a new tone. Even Torvex, begrudgingly, began to acknowledge the necessity of humanity's resilience. Lyra, however, remained cautious. This war is far from over, she warned the assembly. Humanity has proven its strength, but strength alone will not secure peace. We must decide whether we stand with them or against them because the battles yet to come will not wait for us to choose. In Zircon space, Overlord Caronte brooded in the shadows of his damaged flagship. The humans had bested him again, but this time he felt no frustration, only resolve. The humans could adapt, but so could he. The next battle, he vowed, would be different. And across the galaxy, species watched and waited, their eyes fixed on humanity. The question was no longer if humanity would survive but how far they would go, and what the galaxy would become under their influence. The galaxy had shifted irrevocably, its once fragile balance shattered by war, and yet not everyone was prepared to embrace the new reality. In the aftermath of the Zircon's second defeat, the Galactic Conclave convened in an emergency session. Delegates from every species filled the chamber, their faces etched with unease as whispers of humanity's growing influence rippled through the assembly. Ambassador Lyra stood in the center, her translucent form shimmering under the harsh light. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of those who glared at her with suspicion and those who nodded with quiet support. The war had exposed the galaxy's fractures, but it had also revealed a truth that many were still unwilling to face. Ladies and gentlemen, Lyra began, her voice steady and resolute as she gestured toward the holographic display of Earth. Humanity is not the enemy. They are a species forged by centuries of struggle, rising from ashes to meet challenges that would have broken most of us. They are a species forged by adversity, strengthened by challenges that would have broken most of us. What we have witnessed is not a threat, it is an opportunity. Counselor Torvex, ever the critic, rose from his seat. His spines bristled and his voice carried a harsh edge. An opportunity? They've torn apart every rule of engagement, dragged us into their chaos, and left us wondering who they will target next. This is not a species to be trusted. Lyra's gaze didn't waver. And yet, without their intervention, how many of us would still have a home? How many of us would still be free? The Zircon are relentless, and without humanity's resolve, they would have consumed us all. Humanity fights not out of malice, but out of necessity. Torvex sneered. You place too much faith in a species that has yet to prove it can be anything but destructive. Lyra's tone sharpened. And you underestimate the potential of unity. Humanity has shown us that survival requires adaptation. We can choose to learn from them, or we can cling to our fear and watch as the galaxy tears itself apart. On Earth, the cost of victory weighed heavily. In the heart of the United Earth Command headquarters, Commander Elena Torres stood before a room of senior officers. The battle had been won, but the toll was undeniable. Holoscreens displayed images of the fallen, their names scrolling endlessly across the walls. "Let's not deceive ourselves," Torres began, her voice steady but heavy with the burden of leadership. "This war isn't over. The Zircon will return, stronger and more determined. If we're going to survive what comes next, we need to do more than prepare. We need to evolve." General Yu, a seasoned veteran with a reputation for pragmatism, leaned forward. "What are you proposing, Commander?" Torres met his gaze. "A coalition. Not just of human nations but of species united by purpose. Together we can redefine what it means to fight for survival and build something enduring. The galaxy has seen what we can do, but we can't fight this alone. If we want to win the war and secure peace, we need allies willing to stand with us." The room murmured with unease. Earth had long been seen as a newcomer to the galactic stage, and many doubted whether other species would trust them enough to join forces. But Torres remained resolute. "We've shown them what humanity is capable of," she continued. "Now we need to show them that we can lead not through fear, but through cooperation. We can't just be the species that survives. We need to be the species that inspires." In the dimly lit command center of his repaired flagship, Overlord Caranti stood shrouded in shadows, his piercing gaze locked onto the holographic display of the human fleet's movements. Each tactic replayed before him like an unsolved riddle. Images of the human fleet, their tactics, their unpredictability, all played out in front of him like a grim reminder of his failures. "We underestimated them," Caranti admitted, his voice low and measured. "But we will not make that mistake again. The humans adapt, yes. But so can we." His advisors watched him carefully, their antennae twitching in anticipation of his next move. Caranti turned to face them, his mandibles clicking with determination. "We will not face them as we have before. This time we will strike not at their ships but at their unity. We will sow discord, turn their allies against them, and fracture their coalition before it begins." One advisor stepped forward cautiously. "And if that fails, Overlord?" Caranti's eyes burned with a cold fire. "Then we will bring the full might of the Zircon to bear. No subtle maneuvers, no more games. This time, we will strike to erase not just their forces but their very legacy." Months passed and the galaxy stood on a knife's edge. Humanity's efforts to build a coalition were met with both support and resistance. Ambassador Lyra worked tirelessly, traveling from one star system to the next, her words a beacon of hope for those willing to listen. In a grand hall on the planet Vayara, Lyra addressed a gathering of leaders from dozens of species. The room buzzed with tension, the air thick with the weight of history. Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady and resolute. "Humanity has shown you their strength," she said. "But strength alone is not enough. We stand here today not to ask for your submission, but to offer our hand. Together we can face the darkness that threatens us all. Divided we will fall. United we can create a future where no species has to stand alone." Her words lingered, weaving through the tense air. Some leaders murmured doubts, their skepticism etched into furrowed brows, while others exchanged nods of cautious agreement, their faces reflecting the profound weight of her proposal. Slowly, one by one, leaders stepped forward, pledging their support. The coalition was born not out of fear, but out of a shared desire to survive and thrive. The next battle came swiftly. The Zircon, true to Caranti's promise, launched a campaign unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Saboteurs infiltrated allied worlds, spreading chaos and mistrust. Battles erupted on multiple fronts, each more brutal than the last. But humanity and their newfound allies held the line, their resolve unshaken. On the bridge of the Resolute, Torres stood tall, her voice cutting through the noise of battle like a beacon. "We've faced worse odds before," she reminded her crew, her tone steady with conviction. "And we've prevailed. Today is no different. Let's show them the true strength of unity." The combined fleet moved as one, their coordination a testament to the strength of their alliance. The Zircon fought with ferocity, but for every advance they made, the coalition pushed back harder. Victory was not quick, nor was it without cost, but when the final Zircon ship retreated into the void, the galaxy knew it had witnessed something extraordinary. In the aftermath, the coalition stood stronger than ever, their unity tempered by the fires of shared sacrifice. Across allied worlds, solemn tributes echoed in cities and halls, honoring those who had given everything for the fragile hope of a brighter future. Memorials were erected on every allied world, honoring those who had given their lives for a chance at peace. On Earth, A statue was unveiled in the heart of New Geneva, a depiction of humanity and its allies standing together, their eyes turned toward the stars. In the galactic conclave, Ambassador Lyra stood once more, her voice filled with hope and determination. "Today we have proven that unity is our greatest weapon," Lyra declared, her voice filled with quiet strength. "The galaxy is vast, its challenges daunting, but together there is nothing we cannot face, nothing we cannot achieve." And across the stars, the message was clear: humanity had not only survived, they had inspired a galaxy to believe in the power of resilience, adaptability, and unbreakable bonds.